Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of VH2 Presents. Today is the final round of the Ozzy Osborne song draft. So, the first round, the first round, we did the starters. We did your Ray Allens, your Giannis Antetokounmpos, your Michael Jordans. Round two, we did our backups, so our Steve Kerrs, our Manu Ginobili's. And now today, we are doing what I think actually might be the most fun round, is we are doing the role players. So we are talking about like your Kyle Korver, 3-point shooters off the bench, or we're talking about even like a Dan Gadzuric, a guy who might play 8 minutes a night, but he'll provide some energy and some entertainment, even if he's not the best player on the floor. And Evan, I appreciate your perplexed reaction when I mentioned Dan Gadzuric, but I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. It's the second time you brought up Dan Gadzuric. I think of these as the Robert Horrys.
Yeah, Robert Horry is probably the best example, actually.
But definitely the role players, the guys that are going to come in and use their veteran experience and mentality to push a game over the edge. Mm-hmm. And this is the long-awaited third round of a 3-part series that we've done. If you haven't listened to parts 1 and 2, you need to pause this, go back. You're going to need a good 2.5 hours to listen to both of them. So I suggest you get some snacks, get something good to drink, put on some Ozzy and give it a watch.
Yeah. It'll be an enlightening time that you will not regret. And I think what I'm really looking forward to about this is, looking at this from like constructing our roster of Ozzy songs, is that this one. So I'm thinking about it like I'm putting together a mixed CD of 15 songs, and you need songs that have like a specific purpose that also like fit in with the rest of the songs. So like one thing that's on my mind is that if I'm making a mixed CD of Ozzy songs, like what do I want as the last song? And like that's when I'm thinking of like role players, like that's kind of one of the thoughts that I have. So it's part of that overall roster construction, and I have an idea for the last song and what I'd want to have on there, and we'll see if I get a chance to take it, or if you will snatch it from my team.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. I like that whole last song thing. That actually ends up fitting well with my choices, at least the players I hope I get to draft.
Yeah. Well, let's do a quick recap of the teams. So starting with Evan, so his number 1 pick was Flying High Again, and the rest of his roster, we have Revelation Mother Earth, Mama I'm Coming Home, No More Tears, I Don't Know, You Can't Kill Rock and Roll, Miracle Man, Time After Time, Fire in the Sky, and Suicide Solution. My number 1 pick was Mr. Crowley, followed by Bark at the Moon, Over the Mountain, See You on the Other Side, Goodbye to Romance, Devil's Daughter, Holy War, Back on Earth, Believer, I Just Want You, and I Don't Want to Stop. Evan, is there anything on here that surprises you or sticks out?
What sticks out the most, I'm actually already kind of regretting some of my choices. I really wish I would have nabbed Goodbye to Romance. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where I would have put it, though. Just kind of looking at this, I do feel confident in my top 5. The most controversial, probably Mama I'm Coming Home, but I stand by it for the reasons I gave in the first episode. I guess what I'm struck by is that, like, so if you're looking at the screen, like the bench players, the orange titles on the whole really do represent like a very different Ozzy than the yellow. Mm-hmm. They are deeper cuts. These are like pretty much mostly side Bs, except maybe for like Miracle Man and lesser known tracks. Mm-hmm. Maybe not so much for Suicide Solution either, but anyway, yeah, it's a good list. I think we've got like conceptually different things going on with the 2 rounds of the draft, and I think that makes it for a more interesting basketball game at the end of the day.
I certainly agree, and I'll say I know, again, if you listen to round 1, you'll hear our take on Crazy Train. I do not have any intention on drafting Crazy Train.
It's not getting drafted.
It's not getting drafted.
Crazy Train didn't make the cut, and I think that's because it's like it's sort of like, I don't know. There's a lot of things you could say. It's an impossible song to draft, right?
Yep.
There's just, you can't draft a song. It's like drafting the song Happy Birthday. Crazy Train is as ubiquitous as Jingle Bells, Happy Birthday, and Wheels on the Bus. You can't put it on a list of songs. We can't have the same discussion.
Yeah.
But obviously iconic and whatever.
Yeah. It almost feels like a public domain, like folk song, like Camptown Races or something at this point.
Right.
I will say, I just want to comment on this one is, so I think one thing that does stick out is there's only one Jake E. Lee track on here. And
that's right.
for that. And also, for mine, Devil's Daughter and Believer are two tracks that I really, truly started to appreciate going through this process of putting together the board. So there are some Ozzy songs which I had heard before but never really came to appreciate to this extent until now. And Devil's Daughter and Believer, off of No Rest for the Wicked and Diary of a Madman respectively, are a couple of those.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, should we go ahead and get right into it? We've got.
Let's get right into it. So with the 11th overall pick, or I'm sorry, the 11th round, you get to start. You won the coin toss, so you get the first pick today.
All right, it's tough. This is a tough call. It's between two tracks, and I'm actually going to go with one of my top favorite songs from the Randy Rhoads era. And I believe the last song, what's the word where it's the name of the title for the record, or eponymous or something like that?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm selecting Diary of a Madman off
right.
of the record Diary of a Madman. That's going to be my 11th overall pick and my first role player. And I think it's a perfect example of the kind of song that you just described. This is a good closer, for your draft. I'll go ahead and just share the screen again so we can see here. It's got Diary of a Madman. And I guess just quick in terms of rationale, I really dig the Ozzy tracks that have sort of multiple chapters to them. That's why Revelation Mother Earth was my number 2 overall pick. And I think Diary of a Madman is almost like a sister song to Revelation in that sense. Mm-hmm. It's longer. It's got a very sort of in-depth kind of provocative intro. It doesn't start off with the gratifying, blazing distortion riffs. It's got a sort of witchy Black Sabbath-y vibe to it. One of my favorite tracks off that record, and one of my more recent favorites as I've gotten deeper into Ozzy's catalog. So number 11, Diary of a Madman. That's my pick.
Yeah, and that's Diary of a Madman too. I'll just say that's an album that I really for the Randy Rhoads era. Again, coming into this draft, I was all about Blizzard of Oz, and I really had a chance of rediscovering Diary of a Madman, which I just think overall has it's just a great album, and it has a great vibe to it.
Yeah, as you can see, I got some colors going on here. We got a nice little visualization. You can see, I made your name bigger than mine now, Mike. So,
but yeah, of course. But yeah, that's that classic. Okay, so so this is my turn, and this is a tricky one. I am, I'm going to keep on with the closing track theme, and I'm also going to dip into the Diary of a Madman bucket, and I'm going to go with Tonight.
Interesting. I would have never. That's very good. So let me dig that up out of the old Ozzy library here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that pick.
That song, I mean, it comes down to I need more coffee to be able to properly articulate things here, but it's just the emotion of the song, and just the vocal melody, it just has a certain finality to it. Mm-hmm. And that's just the way the track winds down at the end. It's it kind of has this is a horrible analogy that I can't help but making anyway, is it kind of has a similar vibe that I get from the Semisonic song Closing Time, where it just has this Yeah, I think that's probably all that you can play that will prevent us from getting.
That was 1.2 seconds of Ozzy's Tonight off of Diary of a Madman.
Yeah, but it's easy. It's easy for me to imagine this track of like you go see an Ozzy show and he's rocking out and it's the encore and he's like, hey everyone, I have one last track for you, and like they play this one and everyone feels satisfied about it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally love the song, and this is just reminding me of, I think, the point I made earlier. Like this, for me, Diary is far and away my favorite Ozzy album. So if I could only take one record, if I could only take one Ozzy song, well, I guess I'd take Flying High Again because that's what I picked first.
Mm.
But if I could only take one record, I would take this. Mm-hmm. Even as incredibly important as Blizzard of Oz is, I just love every track on this record. Good pick. I wasn't going to take it, so you didn't steal it, but definitely not a bad choice.
Yeah, but that's going to be my closer. When I put together this Spotify playlist that I can share with anybody who wants, this will be the last one on there.
Yeah, so, what's the perfect number of Ozzy tracks for a Spotify Ozzy playlist?
Well, that's a very good question. I can tell you right now the Ozzy playlist that I've put together for this one has 34 songs and it's 2 hours and 41 minutes. But that's not really answering your question. I would say probably 12, a solid 12 tracks. Okay. I think for like I like my movies 90 minutes to 45 minutes. I would say I like my albums to be like 45 to 55 minutes. So
fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
Might vary a little bit.
A nice car ride, from say like Milwaukee, Wisconsin to like South Racine or Kenosha.
Yeah. Like that. Yeah. And I'm going to say one last thing with the Tonight before we move on to the next track is that I'm thinking like if we're driving back from the Bradley Center to Throwback, let's say we're driving back from the Bradley Center watching a Bucks game, and Tonight comes on just as we're about 5 or 6 minutes away from home. Whether the Bucks lost or the Bucks won, if I heard that song, I think it would make me feel better.
Yeah.
So.
Well. So you got a good pick.
All right.
I think it would depend on the loss, but okay. So for number 12, I'm gonna go with, and I think you're gonna be a little mad at me about this, but
all right.
It's gonna be Perry Mason. Off of
okay. Good.
Which is, in a way, I'm a little surprised it hasn't come up till now. Definitely one of my longtime favorite Ozzy tracks. One of the first songs that really got me into Ozzy, honestly, because at that age, I was around 10, 11 years old when the song came out, and I was heavy into music videos on MTV, as many of us were in the mid-90s. And I remember the video for Perry Mason. I remember seeing Zakk Wylde doing the guitar solo and thinking that, there were two like big music videos with guitar solos, and I remember being just totally enamored. And one was the Guns N' Roses November Rain, watching him play the solo in front of the chapel. And then the other was the Zakk Wylde solo and Perry Mason. Just another like super tasteful, kind of like perfect fit for the song kind of solo. And obviously just a really cool song. Kind of goes with this theme of Ozzy's, like picking these weird like male celebrities to sing about, or like male figures. But yeah, I also feel like there's some sort of connection, like there's something similar about the songs Mr. Crowley and Perry Mason. I don't know enough about the origins of Mr. Crowley, but maybe you do. I know Perry Mason was a detective show or something like that. But
I think Mr. Crowley is named after Aleister Crowley, who was like a 18th, 19th century, maybe early 20th century. It's a very, very long range of time I'm giving, but like kind of like an English like occult figure. Okay. I think that was who Mr. Crowley was. But yeah, I think Perry Mason. I think that was a Matlock style detective show.
Yeah. Okay.
Makes an interesting subject. I think for Perry Mason, for me, was like that was the introduction for me into the Osmosis era of Ozzy Osbourne, which of course gets into I Just Want You and
yes.
And I'm like, why am I drawing a blank? See You on the Other Side. Perry Mason opening track off of Osmosis. I love the intro to that song. I just love the build up. I think that again, Ozzy's tracks, that's a constant theme in his songs of just a good good intro, good build up to this, layers on top of itself, and just very, very satisfying hard rocking track.
Was this going to be one of your picks for the bottom 5 for the role players?
I would have selected that. Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. It's funny. This is the one in my list that's not really a role. This is just a good Ozzy song. It was probably like the top single off that record. And it's not as sort of it doesn't stray off the beaten path as much as some of the other ones I picked for this round. Yeah. Like I said, I was a little surprised didn't make it up there earlier, but feeling good, feeling like I got a good team here. So
yeah. And before I make my pick, I want to say I think the previous round we did of the backup players was kind of the most difficult to speak about, because it's like Back on Earth, just a good song. Fire in the Sky, solid track. It's like it's kind of difficult to to talk about something. It's like talking about like Chris Middleton. It's like, really good player.
Yeah.
So all right, okay. So my selection. So this is very much getting into a role playing. So I'm thinking I'm putting together my track here, and I do want to give the Jake E. Lee era a bit of due, and we have not picked anything off of the Ultimate Sin album, and I feel like it we need to pay homage to that era a little bit. So I'm going to go with Shot in the Dark.
All right.
For my next selection.
Steal it from me.
Yeah. So I think that's in my opinion, Shot in the Dark is the second best song of the Jake E. Lee era, with Bark at the Moon, of course, being the top one. And it's for me to speak about the specific track, I just think it's a good song, and I think it's a good song. Like the lyrics, like the vocal melody. I think it's pretty solid guitar solo there.
Shot in the Dark is like that. The opening riff for Shot in the Dark is like the classic sleazy '80s guitar riff. You know what I mean? I don't really know how to justify my saying that, other than it's just like it's sleazy. It sounds kind of like a darker version of a lot of the Motley Crue riffs, and it was positioned very, right in that era, 1986. This is Ozzy's glam period, if ever there was one. And Jake E. Lee was kind of a glam guitar player. And it's a good riff, that is a great, but it's super 80s. You know what I mean? Like, listen to Randy Rhoads play, and those are almost like, he almost sounds like, I don't associate his sound with the 80s. You know what I mean? And maybe that's because he's almost more of like a 70s style player, but like, it's so distinctive that I don't necessarily, he doesn't sound like anybody else. Whereas like, this is Shot in the Dark, great example. It's like a good glammy metal sleazy song. But it's not really much different. Like Ozzy didn't take as many risks with this record. It's almost like he probably wasn't even really behind the wheel. Like somebody just kind of said like, this is how it is right now. You're going to make this record, blah, blah, like,
yeah. I could see like Sharon being like behind this one.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I think that Jake E. Lee, I think, is a very solid guitar player. But as we've talked before, I think he's more of a session guitar player than an icon like Randy Rhoads or Zakk Wylde. But with that said, I think when you think about like distinctive, memorable guitar work from Jake E. Lee, I think that Shot in the Dark, outside of the Bark at the Moon, is the best example of it. So I think it's a really good solo, which fits into that song. And you're right. I mean, talk about like this sleazy guitar riff, and I mean, it's just kind of a sleazy song to begin with, like that opening lyric, "Out on the streets, I'm stuck in the night." It just has that kind of sleazy vibe to it, which is distinctive. So, but I'm going to predict that this will probably be the last Jake E. Lee song that is selected here. We will find out, but that would be my prediction.
Well, we'll see about that. Let's see how the rest of the draft shakes out here. There's still a couple decent ones out in there.
There are. Bark at the Moon does have some other good tracks. Anyway, your selection here, good sir, for the 13th player on your roster.
Okay. So my number 13 pick is a track that might surprise you. Now it's not the kind of Ozzy you can just throw on any time. And again, it's like it's a bit more of a playful song off one of Ozzy's greatest records. And I'm going to go ahead and pick Mr. Tinker Train from No More Tears. I don't know where that song shows up on the record.
I think it's the opening track.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah.
So I like it because it's got that kind of like maniacal carnival type feel to it. Ozzy's trying to be scary and spooky and silly, which he is. And I think this is a great example of that. Cool chorus, not the catchiest tune in his song bag, but a fun track, and another one that sort of took me a while to wake up to. Just, as a younger listener, we talked about this. You're sort of fixated on the songs that are like the most, got the best hooks and the ones that are the most ubiquitous and grab you. And this is not one of those songs, but I think it's another one like we've talked about, like Revelation and Diary of a Madman. Give it a little bit more of a chance. It'll suck you in. So Mr. Tinker Train for me.
Yeah, you're right. It does have that like creepy circus intro. Dun, 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 dun. I'm not going to do any more so the bots take our song off, but you know what I mean. But no, it has that creepy intro. I think it's just like it's a powerful and fun song, especially once it gets going too.
Right.
And it has a little bit of the I guess a little bit of like dorky Ozzy in there. It's like, can you say Mr. Tinker Train?
Yeah.
which is amusing.
Hammy, corny.
Yeah, hammy is the word to use.
For sure.
That.
How do you think Zakk Wylde felt about Mr. Tinker Train, back in 1990 or whatever when that record came out, 91?
I would imagine he would like it. I don't know.
I would say he probably didn't like it, but
you don't think so? What characteristics of the song would you say would have upset Mr. Wylde?
I guess I would assume that Zakk Wylde is a guy who, especially at that young age, probably took himself pretty seriously, and having to play on a kind of kooky, weird, silly track like this. Then again, I'm sure he, was well aware that he was quite lucky to be playing with Ozzy. So maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know much about his catalog. This hasn't come up at all during these 3 little episodes we've done here, but it's worth noting Zakk Wylde, a guy who was very prolific in his own right as a solo musician. And I'll be honest, I don't know any Zakk Wylde Black Label Society songs.
Yeah.
And I've tested the waters a few times, and I've always come back disappointed.
Yeah.
It's weird. I feel like he sings, and he actually sounds like Ozzy. He sounds like a person who's trying to sound like Ozzy, which is weird. It's like, and when you think about, like, I don't know how old he was when he started with Ozzy, but I think he was real young, like maybe 19 or 20. So, Ozzy's like his dad. But anyway, Zakk Wylde, if you're listening to this, obviously, we love your work. I'm sure there's some good stuff in BLS. Maybe one day, if I'm really bored, give it a listen. But
yeah, well, hey, if there's we're coming at you during coronavirus quarantine. So if you're ever going to get into a Black Label Society, now's the time. The next one, I'm looking at my board here. I'm going to go with a track which I recently discovered. And I believe this was the Crazy Train B-side off the single. So Blizzard of Oz era, You Looking at Me, Looking at You is the track that I'm going with.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I think this is
how that goes.
It's you looking at me, looking at you.
Cool, yeah.
I want to talk to you. Which, again, has a really good Randy Rhoads solo on there too, which I want to keep. And he just, I mean, the solo by itself is good enough for it. Again, I think the song has a bit of just a really good, I would say, out of all of the Ozzy songs, I think that one has the most classic rock sensibilities to it. I think that track would like more or less feel at home on like Boston's debut album. But it's just it's just good fun song with a great Randy Rhoads guitar solo, which is why it's on there.
Randy's king.
So and like when I'm putting together my roster here, it's especially with these role players, like this is one, gotta get the solo and just want to make sure that I stock up on all of the Randy Rhoads gems while I have the chance.
It really is unfortunate we can't play little clips of these songs. Like I guess my hope is that people who are like listening to this will at the very least feel curious enough to poke around and give some, especially these deeper cuts like we're going through now.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to go ahead and give you my 14.
Let's do it.
And I'm going back to No Rest for the Wicked. Like I said, I've kind of fell in love with that record over the last couple of years. Probably my current most listened to over this last few years. Mm-hmm. This track is called Breaking All the Rules, off of No Rest for the Wicked. Something about that hook in the chorus. Breaking all the rules. That was my mic impression singing Ozzy.
There you go.
I did it for you. I don't do performances like that often, but I'll do it for my best friend Mike here. So Breaking All the Rules, number 14. It's I think that song and Fire in the Sky are like the two Ozzy gems I've discovered most recently and felt very excited about. Just like, wow, who knows what other buried treasure is out there. But this is a great song. Again, it's not quite as catchy and hooky as the big ones off that record. In fact, I think the big single off of No Rest for the Wicked was Crazy Babies, which I actually am not super fond of that song.
Yeah.
It's just kind of boring.
Yeah, I share your sentiment about Crazy Babies as well.
I'm not going to put that on that would probably be the last track I'd take off that record, to be honest. But anyway, so yeah. Breaking
All the Rules. Again, that's a solid track. I will say for me, the hook with that song just doesn't quite resonate with me the same way it does with you. So,
okay, that was a little snippy, Mike. You don't have to make me feel bad about it, okay? That really hurt my feelings.
Oh well, geez. Well, now I feel bad, and I think we need to pause the podcast here so we can talk this out.
Not pausing it. Let everybody see.
Let everybody simmer. So
we're doing good. We're doing real good up until now. We almost got to the end, and you hurt my feelings. And I don't even know. I was going to see if you wanted to do a trade after we finish up here, but now I don't want to trade with you. So. Oh geez.
Well, you'll get over it. It's a good song.
All right. Okay, 14. Mike, what you got?
Well, geez, I'm gonna go back. Well, I'm gonna explain my thought process on here because I very recently made the prediction that there would be no more Jakey Lee tracks that were selected. There are a few off of Bark at the Moon album, which I do like, which I think would fit in well with my selection here. And I only have 2 picks left, so. I can't pick one from every single era of Jakey Lee, Zakk Wylde, and Randy Rhoads. So it's kind of a difficult pick. But I am going to dip back into Diary of a Madman, and I'm going to go with SATO.
That's a good one. Yeah. Standard. That's a classic track. It's funny. Like you're taking all the good Diary songs. You said you didn't like that record on the first podcast.
I was very wrong. That was like one of the most incorrect opinions. Because, I think on the first podcast or either prior to the first podcast or maybe we were talking offline, I was mentioning that I liked Blizzard start to back and I liked Diary of a Madman, the first 2 tracks, Flying High Again and Over the Mountain. And then I was like, the rest of it, I'm like, the rest of it didn't really resonate. But again, since we started doing this, I really went back into Diary of a Madman, and I was very wrong. And it's kind of like the lyric off of Bark at the Moon, they have returned to prove him wrong, so wrong. That's me. That's me being wrong.
So in other words, you have like kind of changed your draft picks a little bit relative to when we first started this process.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Like, so it would be interesting to see if we did this again in 5 years, if we draft the same songs and what the differences would be. I bet it would be I bet we wouldn't have. I bet it would be around 30 to 40% turnover.
Yeah, I think that you are. I think that is right. And SATO, I want to say just to talk about this track real quick is for me it's like it has one of those guitar solos which just like keeps on going and like you think it's gonna end but then it keeps on happening. And I like that relentless style of guitar solo. I think it fits into the song well, and it's just an overall fun song.
It's high performance. Yeah.
High performance, yeah. It's like
where it's at.
Mm-hmm. But that is, yeah. So that's where I'm at there. We'll see again. Maybe, who knows? Maybe maybe the next time we do it, like we will have a bigger appreciation for Black Rain, and what was the one that has Dreamer on it? What's the name of that album?
Oh.
Down to Earth. Yeah, Down to Earth. Yeah, maybe we'll have more of an appreciation of Black Rain and Down to Earth, and it'll be all tracks from those albums.
I doubt it. I think, it's more about these kind of deeper tracks that you form a new relationship with when you get into it. But anyway, well, last but not least, well, I guess least, it's 15th out of 15, so that makes it least. My pick is going to be, I know you said you didn't expect any more Jakey Lee. And this was kind of like, when I was going through the tracks, making my 15th pick, definitely an example of one of those songs that like is unconventional to my typical Ozzy tastes, but a fantastic role player for like those weird pregnancy cravings. When you're listening to Ozzy, you just want that kind of funky little slice that he did. Back to Jakey Lee, back to Ultimate Sin, Killer of Giants.
All right.
15. That's my pregnancy craving Ozzy song. And I have finished my draft.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a when you were describing it, when you were describing everything, I did not expect you to say Killer of Giants. I expected you to say Spiders.
That's another very similar to Killer of Giants. Yeah. And Spiders has got to be probably, I think you can make a case that it's the worst 80s era Ozzy song. Definitely it's a joke. That's got to be a joke. Somebody like Ozzy said, like, hey, let's put this on there. I don't think Killer of Giants is anywhere near as bad as Spiders. It's a more experimental song. He's pushing the boundaries. Plus, it's the most interesting Jakey Lee guitar work, and like it's hard to get a whole lot of good, not stock, boring guitar out of him. And it's another one of those longer epic type Ozzy songs. There aren't a whole lot of those, the 6-minute plus tracks with multiple dimensions. As you know, I've got a soft spot for that. So, that's sort of why I made the pick.
Yeah, I think lyrically, I think Ozzy has a lot of thoughts about the Cold War, and and I think those come through in Killer of Giants as well. So, okay, so that is your one and only Jakey Lee track.
I had to give him a nod. Yeah.
If there was any other track that you would have selected from either Ultimate Sin or Bark at the Moon, which would it have been?
Well, there's actually another good one off Bark at the Moon, like melodically it's not bad. It's like ballady.
Are you thinking of You're No Different?
You're No Different.
Different.
Yeah, somebody could have picked that. I'm actually surprised that didn't make it up there.
Well, it's very funny that you say that, because as I'm looking at my last selection, I am really between. I'm going to pick it. You're No Different is what I'm going to take.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my final selection.
Speak of the Devil, You're No Different. Speak of the Devil, of course.
Yeah.
An Ozzy record that is ineligible for draft because it consists of nothing but live Black Sabbath covers.
Yeah.
from the random
But
ones.
but for you're no different. When I was, and a big part of the reason why I'm making this pick too is when I had the original rankings of my songs, I actually had You're No Different at number 22, and this would be the 30th pick. So I had it initially ranked pretty highly when I've made like Ozzy mixes on Spotify before. Like You're No Different has been on there, and yeah, it's a good ballady track. Now, for the Jakey Lee era, there's also a track which I really just rediscovered, which was "Center of Eternity" off of "Bark at the Moon," which is also a fun song and has some good guitar, high performance, lots of notes, guitar playing from Jakey Lee.
Ah, yes.
"Center of Eternity." So,
Is that wait, that's off Ultimate Sin though, right?
no, that's "Bark at the Moon."
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Center of Eternity.
Yeah, I'm going to say I think that this is a good chance to talk about some other songs, so like some honorable mentions
Sure.
of songs that were not selected. And I will start. One song I was originally planning on taking with my final pick, just to drum up a little controversy, was the Lita Ford duet "If I Close My Eyes Forever."
Oh, interesting. Didn't even think about
I
that.
did not end up selecting that one. I don't think that it would have fit on with the mix, but that is an Ozzy track which I have enjoyed. He has a songwriting credit for it, so I would consider that an Ozzy song.
That's a great song.
And also there's also "Rock and Roll Rebel," which would have been a good one, and Dreamer off of "Down to Earth" I think is the best track off of that album.
I mean, there's a lot of great Ozzy songs that didn't make it on here, to be honest. He's got a deep catalog, and I could probably pick anything. I could make a case for almost anything off of Blizzard, Diary, or No More Tears getting in the top 15 on a given day. But definitely, yeah. I think if I could take one additional track, another one that I didn't pick because it's not really an Ozzy song, but it's like an important song to me. One of my favorites is D, the kind of interlude classical guitar track off of Blizzard of Oz. Gosh, yeah, it's like Blizzard of Oz. There's Steal Away, awesome. No Bum Movies. There's not a bad track on that record.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, you looking at me, looking at you. I totally forgot about that one. But anyway, any other honorable mentions you want to make?
Oh, I would say I think D is a good call out there. "I Don't Want to Change the World" off of No More Tears, also a solid one.
Very good, very good.
I will a track that I was considering too was the title track off of "The Ultimate Sin," of course, being "The Ultimate Sin," which I think is a good rock song with kind of that like crunching guitar riff to it. I think the reason I didn't select that is I just feel that like that kind of like crunching like guitar riff was just like done a lot better by Zakk Wylde. So I think if that's like kind of what I'm looking for, that dun, 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 that there were just better alternatives in Ozzy's catalog. I think it's still a good song. I think that is as we know. I mean, "Bark at the Moon" and "Ultimate Sin" era Ozzy is one of my favorites. If not my favorite, the music video for that song, where it's a parody of the Dallas TV series and Ozzy Osbourne as an oil executive. I think that's just a really funny video, and worth watching. And because it's Ozzy as an oil executive, and then he's like watching videos of himself performing a concert of "The Ultimate Sin," and it's just good stuff all around. But yeah, that's a pretty good track. But yeah, I think we could have added instead of 15, we could have made this a 20 song roster, and we could still keep going.
Yeah, definitely. Well, see, the other interesting thing about the whole Ultimate Sin era, so a little VH2 tidbit. When Ozzy toured on the Ultimate Sin, that was when he had Metallica as his opening act. Not as well known. Their first big arena tour opportunity, and that's of course the famous. They started off, and all the Ozzy fans are like, "Who the hell are these guys?" And then by the end of the tour, people were showing up more to see Metallica than Ozzy, and they were upstaging him. just because they were so much better. And that tour really like launched Metallica deeply into the, you know, the mainstream, really. Their next record being the And Justice for All, with their first like big mainstream single. Which the reason I mention that is because I think, you know, at some point we'll want to do other drafts.
Yeah.
Metallica is a great candidate. We talked about Van Halen.
Well, I was thinking, so when we were coming up with this draft idea, so like, so talking about, you know, the monsters of rock.
Yeah.
So like Ozzy is in my bones, and I know that, you know, I am to Ozzy as you are to Metallica. So I think that Metallica would be the next logical one to do a draft of.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. I know we have some requests for Eric Johnson, a little kind of far off from the Monsters of Rock genre.
Yeah.
Maybe people who listen to Ozzy and Metallica probably don't even really know who Eric Johnson is, but
yeah, well, we could put together an Eric Johnson one too. I think Eric Johnson, to go down that, is once you get past Venus Isle, I don't really understand his.
No,
yeah.
I think we do 7 worlds through Venus Isle only.
Mm-hmm.
First 4, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, I know that we did 15 rounds, 30 songs each for Ozzy Osbourne, but for other artists, we can always like reduce it down to like 10 rounds if needed.
We could do a 10 for Eric Johnson. I still think it'd be fun to do 15.
I do too. It kind of gets fun when you have to dig deep in it. While we're here, I wanted to say this has been Ozzy only. This has been Ozzy only, but I do think that as long as we're on the subject, we should talk a little bit about Black Sabbath. So yeah. I want to do a real quick thing. If you had to pick one like addendum Black Sabbath song to add on here, which would it be? So like as a bonus track.
Well, yeah. So like Black Sabbath, again, like sufficient for plenty of content there for its own draft. Boy, I was not prepared for this.
So I'll start while you're thinking out. So again, you can pick the same track if I did, but if I were to like right now, I would say my top Black Sabbath track, which has changed over time. I mean, going back 10, 15 years, like Sweet Leaf would have been number one. Of course, initially Iron Man would have been a top one. A really good contender would, for right now, would be Lord of this World. But I would say right now my top Black Sabbath track would be the song Black Sabbath, where I just love the intro with the bell and the rain, and that's another song that has several movements to it, and vocally it's just like the low, you know, gravelly Ozzy voice is really good on that song.
It's a good
and because I also don't have Revelation Mother Earth on my particular team, Black Sabbath I think would be a fairly good substitute for it.
Fair enough. Black Sabbath is another one where like my favorites vary. Gosh, it's tough. And I love Black Sabbath for reasons that are so different for the ones which I love Ozzy. But if I could add one, I'd probably take NIB off the first record. That chorus and that song, probably one of the most like haunting Ozzy performances ever. Like that, I feel like is the essence of Ozzy. He's singing that song. And that's what grabs you by the balls when you listen to a lot of these, you know, bigger 80s mainstream, you know, Ozzy tracks that we've been listing.
Yeah. Well, those ones, like we talk about, like Ozzy having the nickname Prince of Darkness. Like when you hear the song like NIB, I could understand why like parents would hear that track and be like, my kids can't listen to this.
Yeah.
It really has a haunting vibe to it, which is palpable.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, cool. So if we want to do any trades, now would be the time. I will propose swapping Goodbye to Romance straight up for No More Tears.
I knew you were going to say it for No More Tears. Well, you know, it's like a 4 for a 5. I was going to offer you Miracle Man for it.
So Miracle Man for Goodbye to Romance?
Right. You're driving a harder bargain here.
Yeah.
You want No More Tears? Change. Let me make a call. Okay, wait.
Oh, it's too late to change my flight.
Okay, all right. How about this? I'll give you No More Tears and Perry Mason for Goodbye to Romance and
Mm-hmm.
boy, Goodbye to Romance, and I guess I'll give. Now, you want to just do it straight up. All right. I feel like that's a fair trade. Okay, so Mike is getting No More Tears, and I'll just go ahead and put that here.
All right.
And No More Tears for Mike. Goodbye to Romance for me.
All right. Okay. I think that's a fair trade. I think those are equally good songs, and I have a slightly more of a emotional connection to No More Tears, given it was the track that I listened to driving to school every morning, senior year of high school. I do want to know with Goodbye Romance is that there is that Havish and Davis commercial.
Oh yes,
which very much steals the do 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 do.
You told me about it, and I didn't believe it, but it's definitely stolen from Ozzy.
For those of you listening, if you are unfamiliar, Havish and Davis being a popular law firm in Milwaukee that had these commercials in the '90s that had the synth outro for Goodbye to Romance as like the theme for their commercials.
Put the link in the show notes.
What's that?
We'll put the link in the show notes to the Havish Davis and Road.
We can do that one. Okay. So, all right. Well, I think this is good stuff. I like what we have here.
Listen,
and should we do Metallica next?
We're gonna kick things back off with Metallica. We're gonna pick up right where we left off. We got Ozzy down. We might revisit our Ozzy list, but we've got a lot more to do here. And VH2 is going to keep on keeping on, quarantine or no quarantine. And we also will, urge all listeners to take a peek at some of our movie-related content, which we will be expanding on as well.
Mm-hmm. This is true. And listen, we also and who knows, maybe you might have Mike's War and Peace podcast.
Yes. So Mike and I.
So for all of you fans of 19th century Russian literature, you might be in for a treat.
Well, personal note, Mike and I are friends, and we have a book club, and we're going to be reading War and Peace because why not?
Yeah, and I can, and I'll be sure to drop it into casual conversation as much as possible going forward. Just like, oh yes, this reminds me of the scene in War and Peace when Natasha finished singing.
Natasha Filipkovia Dostafambia.
All right.
Well,
everybody, we're through here. Good times. Hope that you enjoyed the podcast. Smash that subscribe button if you have anything you want us to cover again. If you have any thoughts about our selections, please leave them in the comments. And have a good night. Stay safe out there.